Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
And welcome to the GammaCast. I'm your host, Charlie the Professor Esser, and with me is...
80s Music Girl.
Yes, awesome 80s Music Girl. Love having you. Always. It is not the same show when you are not here, I'll be honest.
Oh, thank you.
And I am so glad that you are my current permanent co-host here on the GammaCast. And I think
Me
all
too.
of our listeners, however many there may be,
All five of you.
Yeah, well, they don't break out the shows. You know, we know that the 80s Reboot channel does well.
Yeah.
And we're on
Yes.
that channel. We don't know
Yeah.
how many of you are actually listening to the show. Hopefully, a lot of you. Hopefully, you like what we have to say. Tonight's episode, Dark Side.
Dun, dun, dun.
Season 4, Episode 4, first air date, December 5th, 1980.
Nice.
David Barnard is lodging with a family whose teenage daughter develops a crush on him and an animosity towards her seafaring father. When one of David's self-induced experiments goes
Haywire?
wrong, the violent side of his brain begins to take over his personality, as well as the Hulk's. Directed by John McPherson, written by Kenneth Johnson and Nicholas Correa. And, you know, you do find that when those two are working on this, it's usually one of the better episodes, because these are really our showrunners for the series, and they definitely have the sense of what makes a good Hulk episode, I think.
Yeah.
And so our cast, first off, I want to bring up William Lucking, who plays Mike Schultz. He is our seafaring father, and he also he's in Sons of Anarchy right now. So if you're a fan of the Sons of Anarchy, he is Piermont Piney Winston. But prior to this, he was in another Hulk episode. He was in the Antioch Horror, which is where someone decided that the Hulk was a Bigfoot, and that was pretty good.
Nice.
Yes, he played Babe Ruth on The Voyagers, one of my favorite 80s, one of my many favorite. There's so many great stuff from the 80s. Yes, he was also on a series called Shannon, where he was Detective Norm White. He was on Tales of the Gold Monkey, if you remember that, for that whole season in 1982. He played Gandy Dancer. And he was Colonel Lynch on the A-Team.
Wow.
Yeah, so this guy has gotten around, a wonderful actor. And, of course, what I love most, he was in Captain America. Where was it? Captain America 2, Death Too Soon, as Stater. This is our second actor who was in Captain America, Death Too Soon. Previously, we had one of the older actors we've had on the show. He was on there. So, Marvel, just like today, they had the guys coming back. Not quite an interconnected universe yet.
No.
Is also on Greatest American Hero. This guy works. I mean, this guy.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe he's still working. Let me see. What's his? Yeah. Well, I just said he's on Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, he's on Sons of Anarchy.
So this guy is still out there, still working every day, and good for him. Good for him. And then, this I thought was pretty good. Lori, or Laura, because she is a woman now.
Yeah. Yes, she.
Yes, she actually played she actually played Betty Ross in the Incredible Hulk cartoon series in the late 80s.
Wow.
And Betty Ross, of course, is David Banner's girlfriend / wife. So she finally got to get her banner.
Mm-hmm.
I found that great. And then she has gone on to do just tons and tons of anime voiceover work. This
Nice.
girl is still out there, still working. Oh, she's on We Bare Bears. She does
Oh.
additional voices on We Bare Bears, so she is one of the ongoing actresses on that show. So that's good. Oh, and then I just not too much to say about it, but I just did like having Taffy O'Connell or Taffy, or I don't know how to pronounce her name.
There was just so many with strange names in this series. It's just like, really? Do you need two A's together? Taffy, what?
Yeah, but she was also on Wonder Woman in the episode A Date with Doomsday. She played Val, and she, you will know her for playing the blonde girl in lots and lots of movies. Hot blonde, and that was her thing. And man, if ever there was an episode where the raw sexual magnetism of David Banner was going to be explored, this was it.
Honey, I had to open the windows. It was steamy.
Yes.
It was steamy.
But good. And it's interesting. What I found most interesting about this is that they're basically doing a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde riff.
Yes.
But of course, The Incredible Hulk is supposed to be a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde riff to start with. So they just doubled down on the Hyde.
They doubled diet. Yes, they did. And this is, to me, the first time I've ever seen David go all evil, wonky evil, maniacal evil, actually, is even a better term for it.
Well, you know what? Well, yeah. Well, this was a very different kind of evil. We did see him in, I think it was called Mirror Image, maybe.
Okay.
There was one where David has a dual role, where he's also playing a gangster who was essentially his identical gangster. Someone who looked exactly like
a doppelganger.
Yeah, it was his identical doppelganger. Gangster doppelganger, except he was a little bit older, so it was like, so you had David, he had like the grayed out sideburns, he had a beard, he was being all tough, and but this time
reference that sounds interesting.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I think that was season 2. It might have been season 1, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a good one. Yeah, and David really got to do a lot of interesting things in that one. Because he got to play a different character. Bill Bixby got to play a different character. But in this one, Bill Bixby is basically, he becomes Mr. Hyde, and his idea is, and this is, it kind of reminded me of the episode Life and Death, where he's basically trying to have a guy perform brain surgery on him to remove. He's asking this guy to remove the part of his brain that is the source of rage, and it's like, that does not sound like a good idea, David.
No, you're a doctor. Surely you would think twice before you would do something like that.
Yes,
even if it is tainted as it is, you would still need a little bit of that. Yes. I think, for normal life.
But along these same lines, here is this idea that he wants to control the Hulk by silencing his more primal part of his brain and, awakening his more, reasonable part of his brain.
Right.
And they're doing this all with right half and left half, but really that's actually the front half versus the back half. The primal brain is the back half of your brain, and it's really the frontal lobes that have that, smarts part. But, but they this was the 80s, and we were much more concerned about right and left brains than front and back brains. But anyway, David is a boarder at this house, and he is working at a chemical company.
Yeah.
Because, man, just no background checks in the 80s.
None, and he's obviously, the very first scene opens, he's pilfering something called prolixin.
Yeah, he's
whatever
stealing
that
something.
is.
He's stealing drugs.
Yeah,
He is
he's
literally
stealing
drugs from the company he works for.
and nobody knows it. Just
No, well, they won't know
la-di-da,
till they
just
do the
going in.
inventory, I guess, you know.
Well, he'll be long gone by then.
Okay. Anyway, yes. So he steals the drugs. He injects the drugs into his body.
Karate.
And it has the
Whatever.
wrong effect. All of a
Wrong
sudden,
effect.
he starts laughing, and then he starts talking to himself in the tape recorder about how, David always wanted to control the Hulk, and he wants to let the Hulk out. Which leads to what
about those creepy visions he's seeing with the?
Oh, well, that was a narrative device they decided to use. Clearly,
Yeah.
They decided that it would be a good idea to have David essentially to symbolize what's going on in his brain, to cut to these sort of primordial images of caveman David. Except it's not David; it's some dude.
Yeah. Right.
Some dude who is dating the casting director, I'm going to assume. Yeah, which was kind of weird that they didn't just like have David dress up like a caveman, but they actually just got like Dolph Lundgren or somebody there to be,
Yes.
I mean, not even like Lou Ferrigno, but just like some other completely different person. To go, and first they have him killing some other person, and then they have him taking what he wants as far as a female goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
No,
that was creepy.
That was creepy. That whole Enzyme 7 concoction, I don't know, I think it's another term for raging hormones, because he was just, ooh.
Yeah, it was.
Back.
Yeah. But for what it's worth, the girl is very much, she had a thing for that David Banner border guy, Yeah.
Well, call it what it is, Charlie. It's daddy issues, okay?
Yeah, it is daddy issues, because
she's acting out.
Yeah.
She's acting out. She sees a guy that's probably her dad's age, maybe.
Yeah.
And she thinks, oh, he'd make a really good choice in life.
Yeah.
As far as a husband or a partner.
Well, but though, for what it's worth, he's educated. He's got a good job.
Well, when he isn't eating raw meat and slugging down wine from the fridge. I mean,
to be fair, he didn't eat any raw meat. That was
okay.
That was fully cooked chicken. And when the Hulk comes and bites the side of beef, he did not like it and he threw it away.
No, he didn't. Yeah. Sorry, my standards are a little higher than that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Why isn't the side of beef cooked? Yeah. But they grossed me out when he was sitting there eating the last Thursday's chicken, whatever the hell that had to do with anything.
Yeah.
And he was actually going to kiss her. I'm like, no, don't kiss her with greasy chicken face. Yuck.
Well, a little wine face too. Remember, he's like just pouring the wine down his throat, and he's being crazy. And then and he keeps on having to switch between his personalities, which is interesting. Yeah, and they basically took the plot of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, condensed it into a 45-minute teleplay, and did a very nice job in its modern update too, I think.
Almost after-school specialists.
Yeah, well, what I thought was very interesting, I mean, I always find it weird that, you have that immediate dissociative identity. Which was also kind of interesting. But what I thought was most interesting was just the fact that it's not the Hulk.
Right.
The dissociative identity is just another side of Banner. And that is actually kind of interesting in its own sense when, you were talking about in the comics, this is before we went on, talking about how how Bruce Banner had found a way to give the Hulk his intelligence. And this is actually, if you watch the current cartoons with the Hulk, that's the standard now. And the Hulk has actually not been a dumb Hulk.
No.
Pretty much since, like, the late 80s. You know, they actually in his first appearance, the Hulk is intelligent in the comics,
Right.
And then they sort of dumbed him down.
Yeah.
And then they sort of had moments where they've upped his intelligence in the comics, and one of the things they also did in the 80s was they revealed that there's actually a bunch of different Hulks inside David. That there's, you know, some are intelligent, some are more evil, some are more malicious, and that's one of the things that this kind of reminded me of, is this idea that, you know, you have more than one perspective in David's mind, you know, or in Bruce's mind. You know, and
that's what I was kind of hoping that they were going to do with this one when he started going on about left half, right half. And, you know, like I said, when I told you about the conversation, you know, that my son and I had, and I was thinking, ooh, is Hulk going to become a bit more refined and maybe have a few words with people that they can understand? Well, no, you just made him madder, damn it.
Well, you know, actually what I will say is there were moments in there where I kind of felt like the Hulk was the one who started to pull back. Because, yeah,
he did.
The Hulk was getting angry, but then the Hulk was like, hey, this isn't right. And again, to Lou Ferrigno's credit, as a silent actor, I thought that he really communicated what was going on in the Hulk's mind very well there.
He did.
You know, it would have been nice had they let the Hulk have a little more intellect here. Had they done more of a transference of personality, so that maybe
that's what I was hoping for.
You know, well, you know, Lou Ferrigno was always asking them to let the Hulk speak because the Hulk did speak in the comic books. The Hulk speaks a lot more in the comics than he does in this, and it's going to be interesting when this new Ragnarok comes out if they're actually going to let the Hulk speak. And that was actually from what we understand, a big debate that they had at the time when they were making Hulk Ragnarok or making Thor Ragnarok. You know, was how much should the Hulk speak? And even back then in the 80s, they were debating, you know, do we want to let the Hulk speak? Do we want to do this? And, you know, that was something Lou wanted because Lou wanted the Hulk to have much more of an expressive personality. And unfortunately, Kenneth Johnson and Nicholas Correa did not agree.
Right.
Sorry.
They said no.
But so David is struggling with this split personality issue. He has this dark half that is always trying to dominate and come out, and then you have the dark side come out, and it's like, I'm going to not let you put me back away. Because David has this idea that if he just gives himself another dose of the same drug, that'll have the reverse effect, because
sure it will.
It's like getting conked on the head by a coconut, you know. It's the exact same premise, and you get conked on the head again, everything will go back to normal. But in the meantime, Evil David, we'll call him Bruce. Bruce Banner decides, you know, to put David away, you know, to go out. And if he can't have the 18-year-old girl, good old Miss Farber, who is already quite interested in David, as the women of the day were, invites him to the Swing Shift, a private club she's a member of. Yeah, it was a swingers club, basically. Though for a swingers club, rife with jealousy.
Exactly.
Because David comes in there and he goes to Ms. Farber and, you know, takes her away from the guy that was in the middle of hitting on her.
Yeah.
Which, of course, leads to the guy dragging David off, and he says,
don't make me angry.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Yeah, I'm angry.
Which I thought was lovely. Although, you know, for what it's worth, I kind of felt that, you know, Bill was hamming this character up a bit too much. He was a little too giggly in his evil. For me, he was like a little ha ha ha. He was kind of like, you know, kind of a little too jokery. But aside from that, it was very nice what he was doing, what he was getting through. And of course, the guys are kicking him and beating him, and then up shows a Hulk.
Yeah.
And
He's got the inside joke on them.
yeah,
He's laughing maniacally while he's getting his butt whooped. And they're like, whatever, they just beat him harder. And he's like, oh, just keep doing it, because
yeah. But again,
you're not going to like the outcome.
people in the middle of beating him, why can't Jack McGee catch this guy?
Yes, and here's another episode where he's strangely absent.
Yeah. Well, he's coming back soon. And apparently, in a future episode, another reporter actually figures it all out and doesn't tell Jack. So that's just sad. But
that is very sad.
Yeah, but we'll get to that later. Of course, the dad, knowing that his daughter is attracted to David, does what every reasonable and responsible dad would do, arranges a date with some other boy her own age.
Replacement hitter.
Yes, which his wife tells him isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And there was a nice dynamic I felt between Ellen and Mike, Rosemary Forsyth and William Lucking. I liked the fact that she kept on telling him she's not like me. Basically saying, hey, I forgive you. I really don't care that you go off to sea. Because quite frankly,
I'm the doormat.
I'm kind of nice having the house to myself. But,
exactly.
My wife's grandmother.
I have to cook more now. I have to clean up after you.
Yeah.
Jeez, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, no, my wife's grandmother and her grandfather was in the Navy, and so he'd basically very much the same thing. He would go away for a year at a time. And
yeah. He'd
come back and they'd have another kid.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yes, but so I can see that the wife of a sea captain probably does approach this very differently than the daughter of a sea captain, and the daughter of a sea captain is probably kind of down on her dad always being
bitter. I'm thinking might be a good word.
Yeah, well, it's how it plays out. Anyway, so the Hulk has his Hulk out at the club. Then he goes, terrorizes some poor butcher, played by Nick Sinardo. And then David comes back and decides, Bruce comes back and he decides he's going to run off with Lori. Laura.
She's a woman.
She's a woman now. 18. They did make a very important point. They said you missed her graduation very early on. She is an
I just
adult,
recently had a birthday. I'm legal. Fodder.
We're going to try to limit the creepy as much as possible. And so David comes. He tells her to pack a bag. They're going to run off and hit the road. And she's like, yeah. And then really starts to regret that after they steal the car.
Yeah.
And again, we see that why do they put seatbelts in these cars? They just make them into death traps.
Yeah.
Because David is thrown free and she's trapped in the car as it slowly sinks into the swamp. And then David manages to inject himself with the serum when he gains a little bit of his cognition back. And then immediately after that turns into the Hulk, and then now he's the helpful Hulk again.
Yeah.
And he saves the car, pulls it out, rips the door off, and and saves the day. And then he runs off, and then our little coda is William Lucking, Mike Schultz burning his old memorabilia.
Yeah.
Because as his wife said, you always look at that when you want to go back.
Yep.
You don't use those just to remind yourself of the good old days. You use those to convince yourself it's time to go back out on the open ocean. So. Yeah.
Because real life gets really hard.
Yeah. Well, it does.
Yeah.
And who among us wouldn't want to sometimes just hop a ship and go away?
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
We got our responsibilities, and so we take care of those instead. Who would do the podcast if you and I weren't here, Rosemary?
I don't think anybody would.
Exactly.
It's too much responsibility.
And so that's what we got to do. So, any final thoughts on tonight's episode, Rose?
Yes, a couple.
Okay.
When they're sitting down having dinner, and Mike is telling the story about the minute they hit shore, some guy punches some guy in the face, and nobody
Punches a
knows
cop.
why. Oh, he's even better.
Yeah.
And he starts looking around at them, and she's gazing at David, and he's listening to the story, and then of course the wife interrupts with more potatoes, and I'm like, and then what happens? I want to hear the rest of the story.
Yeah, I was waiting for the I wanted to know why he hit the cop. Like,
Yeah, you people are horrible. Here he starts telling a perfectly good story that, I don't know, I guess you got to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I think that was one of those
The only other
stories where they
Go ahead.
wrote the first half and no one really thought about why he hit the cop. They just needed a good start to the story.
There you go. That's okay. Maybe I'll finish the story.
There you go.
I'll do one of those things. And I don't know why I always notice this fashion sense. It's 1980 exactly, and it's the tail end of the 70s, so to speak. And she gives him, the wife hugs her husband, and she has beige nail polish on, and I'm going, please, beige, really? You people are so boring. My God.
That
Anyway.
may have been a conscious choice to symbolize her boringness.
Oh my God, you hit the nail on the head, because she was a bit drab, wasn't she?
Well, I think she, you know what? She's a woman who intentionally married someone who was going to be away for most of their marriage.
Yeah.
She is a woman who just wanted a quiet life,
Mm-hmm.
quiet house.
Mm-hmm.
They had one kid.
Yeah.
Which, tells you that, that's what she wanted, and she just wasn't gonna, because like I said, like when my wife's grandfather came back, they had a kid each time, and this time this guy comes back and they don't have another kid. Because that would be too much chaos in her life, maybe. I don't know.
Yes, I think you're right.
And
I remember her from her Rosemary Forsyth. I'm thinking she was probably in a few, what do you call those, soap operas.
Oh, yeah.
I remember her being younger, but I'm not going to go into IMDb to look her up, but she does look familiar, and I remember seeing her in a few things.
Yeah, she's been around. She was in Columbo, Kung Fu. She was in Mannix.
Mm-hmm.
She was in WKRP in Cincinnati. She was in ABC After School Special. She did several episodes of Fantasy Island. Yes, she was in Santa Barbara, was the soap opera she did. Mm-hmm. She played Dominic. She did an episode of Remington Steele. She was in Hunter as Dr. Paxton, 3 episodes. She did 3 episodes of Mr. Belvedere. She was also in General Hospital as Dr. James in 1992. Yep. Oh, she was in Star Trek Voyager as Elzen in The Scientific Method, 1997.
Nice.
Darman Gregg. Yeah, she's still acting too, Last thing is she was Louise Miller in Sweet Nothing in My Ear in 2008.
Wow.
Yeah, she gets around. Yeah, well, you're a good actress. There's work,
Yeah.
Especially if you live in California. That's the trick. Or possibly New York.
This is true.
Anyway, yeah. I liked this episode. I thought it was a little campy at times, I felt, with Bill's performance, but aside from that, I thought it was a really great take on a classic story, and anytime you go to a swingers club, that's fun.
Yeah.
Okay. So, 80s Music Girl, how can people find you if they want to talk about how awesome you are?
I'm unavailable for comment. No. I'm 80s Music Girl on Twitter and 80s Music Girl on Facebook and 80s Music Girl on Instagram.
Awesome. And, of course, you can always write to me in that classic 80s email style at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, follow me on Twitter @CharlieEsser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And, of course, when you're following me, you'll get to hear me live tweet The Incredible Hulk 7 o'clock on Saturdays. Thank you for hulking out with us, ladies and gentlemen. Please hulk out with us again.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr @80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.